My name is Orly Ben Roshlight. I am an entrepreneur, business market development, women achievement and empowerment, human rights defender, speaker, and mom. Resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is key to sustainable peace in the Middle East. Peace Now is the largest, longest standing Israeli movement advocating for peace. With me today is the executive director for Peace Now. She is a political and social activist. She served in senior positions in Meretz party and as a parliamentary advisor to member of Knesset Michal Rozin. She was also the community coordinator in Jerusalem for Mahapach-Taghir, a grassroots Israeli Jewish-Palestinian organization for social change. Shalom, Shaqued Morag. Shalom.
Shalom, Orly.
Shalom, welcome, welcome. Shaqued, please let us know, please tell us a little bit about what led you to become an activist working for peace with Israeli Jewish-Palestinian organizations.
Actually, I think that the main incentive was living in Jerusalem. As a student, I moved to Jerusalem for the first time of my life, and I, for the first time of my life, got to understand the occupation or to witness the occupation because it exists in Jerusalem. Even though I was quite aware of the political situation and I served in the army, it was Jerusalem that for the first time exposed to me the complexity and the power relations between Israeli authorities and the Palestinian people. And it was the struggle against the eviction of families in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in East Jerusalem, which I joined sometimes as a student, that made me much more aware of what it actually means.
Wonderful. One of the struggles that underlies policy battles is the continued lack of women in positions of power around the world, from corporate boardrooms to the courts and political leadership. As a woman, what is the biggest challenge you are facing doing the work that you do?
There are many. I can tell you that one of the interesting things that I experience is that whenever I meet with Palestinian leadership, in most cases, I meet with men. In most cases, they're also one generation above me, and it seems as if that's the ruling voice. But I must tell you that it's not only the Palestinian side. Here in Israel, also the decision makers that sit around the table of the security policy are usually men, same age as the Palestinian ones. And a funny anecdote I have about that is that during May, we had a very violent escalation, both in Israel, mainly in Jerusalem, but in other cities too, and on the border with Gaza, including the missile attack. And the press dealt mainly with that. And the first time I got an invitation to come to a news show discussing the current events was on the day of the ceasefire. I mean, there was a whole week or maybe even nearly 2 weeks of fighting in which an opinion of a peace activist and of a young woman was not to be considered or heard. And the first time that they reached out to me was on that Friday of the ceasefire and trying to bring me on to explain, by the way, why is it okay to get to an agreement with Hamas, this terrorist organization, and so on. I had to defend the decision that I was not represented in making, although we do and did have our message echoed in the social media, in the streets and so on. What I can say on the other side, that in both Palestinian and Israeli sides, when I do meet with civil society, the leadership in my generation is consisted of almost equally men and women. And I think that like in other arenas, the civil society is 1 or 2 steps ahead of the political one. And hopefully this standard will find its way also to the decision-making centers.
Yeah, I saw a picture recently of the Israeli government in session, just the new Israeli government, and there was 1 woman at the table out of 12 men that were sitting together. So definitely
Exactly.
we want more women at the table in leadership positions. In 1947, the UN partitioned the land into Arab and Jewish states. The Arabs did not accept the partition and war broke out. The Jews won a decisive victory and expanded their state. The Arab states refused to recognize Israel or make peace with it. Now, in 1967, Israel defeated the Arab armies and captured the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip from Egypt, the Golan Heights from Syria, and the West Bank from Jordan. The consequences of that war gave birth to a new public discourse and controversy over the future of the captured territories. Shaqued, each side believes different versions of the same history. Each side views the conflict as wholly the fault of the other and expects an apology. And each side says they want peace, but it's the other side that doesn't want it. This is very discouraging. How do you overcome such obstacles and help strengthen and build peace?
Wow, this is maybe the question of almost every conflict. From my experience, recognition is a crucial part in reconciliation, mutual recognition. There cannot be any progress without both sides recognizing, if not accepting, the other side's narratives, and finding a way to contain it mutually and to live with it. But the more important part is not to dwell on the past, but to look forward to the future. I'm 37 years old. I wasn't born in the 67 war or the days after it. And if I'll continue defending my side's decisions and narrative and argue for us being right, it will not prevent the continuation of this conflict for the next generations to come, and no one will benefit. And my mission, our mission, is to make this place better for all the people living together between the Jordan River and the sea. And after recognizing that there are unsolved accusations in both sides, we have to find ways to compromise and to build a future together that will bring both sides to prosperity and to the basic conditions for independent and sovereign states to live in.
Right. So you're saying moving forward, we need to kind of move forward in regards to our...
You cannot say I really want peace, but it's the other side's fault. It means that you don't really want peace. Wanting peace meaning to not fall in love with the idea of the conflict, but being prepared to pay some prices in order to achieve a better future. That's peace agreement. It's always a compromise.
Exactly. Israel was established as a Jewish democratic state based on the principle that citizens should not be discriminated against due to religion, race, gender, or any other reason. Arabs make up more than 20% of Israel's population. Many Jews argue that Israeli Arabs have a great life. They are granted most of the rights as other citizens. Some Israeli Arabs have even, risen to high positions in politics and business. They also say that since the Palestinians in the West Bank are governed by the Palestinian Authority and Palestinians in Gaza live under the Hamas rule, their leaders are responsible for taking care of them and not Israel. If the criteria of equality are applied to the fullest degree, hardly any political system in the world would qualify as a fully fledged democracy. Is Israel applying a thin or thick concept of democracy?
Wow, this is another very big question that we deal with on a daily basis. I'd like to distinguish sovereign Israel of the one that the world recognizes, the one that Israel governs in a civil manner, meaning the 67 borders, in which I believe there is nearly full democracy. It doesn't mean that we don't have to continue fighting for full equality, because as a woman, I wouldn't accept the situation that most of my rights are equal. I want full equality. And I don't expect for the Arab citizens of Israel to be satisfied with any less. But we must also look at what's outside the green line, and we cannot claim that Palestinian Authority or Hamas government are fully responsible because simply because they're not a state. If and when there will be a Palestinian state, then it is conditioned with an agreement with Israel and some terms that will have to be fulfilled for it to become a state. Then it will have both the conditions and the responsibility to function as a state responsible, fully responsible to the lives of its citizens. Until then, at the moment, the situation is that Israel is in charge of these people in different ways. In Gaza, we're not present inside anymore, but we are controlling its borders in a very tight way. In the West Bank, it's divided to areas A, B, and C since Oslo agreements back in the 90s. And so the Palestinian Authority is in charge of some of the civil issues, but still most of the security is in the hands of Israel. And practically we see that Israeli army is present almost all over this territory, regardless of the agreements. So we cannot claim that they have the sovereignty to function as responsible to the people while we still control the area and refuse to give independence to the Palestinian people. Once we do, we can start measuring the level of democracy there.
Right. Right. Well, the other issue also is that the militant group Hamas controls Gaza, while Fatah, a secular nationalist political party, administers the West Bank through the Palestinian Authority. Israelis see Hamas with ample evidence as a group bent on murdering Jewish civilians. The divisions between Hamas and Fatah run deep. Then there are all these other Islamist militant groups like Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah. How is Israel supposed to make peace with groups that are at war with each other?
First, we don't have any other choice. This is the partner, and we have to try to reach a point when and where it's capable of negotiating with us and representing its people. There was supposed to be national elections in the Palestinian Authority and in Gaza. It didn't happen because of many reasons. Partly, Israel is responsible for not carrying elections in East Jerusalem, where many Palestinian voters live. And this is one excuse why it didn't happen. Another excuse is that maybe Hamas wants to preserve its control over the West Bank and not challenge it. Whenever peace is made, is nearly always this situation that at least one side is not very stable. We have to find ways to strengthen it and to build its power to the point that it can handle and be responsible for its side in any treaty that we sign. Regarding Hamas and Fatah, I can tell you that unfortunately, the Israeli government during the last more or less decade did not negotiate with the Palestinian Authority or Fatah at all. The only one that got, let's say, achievements from Israel was Hamas, and it was actually rewarded for its violence, because many times when we suffered from Hamas, we reconciled with them and gave them different kinds of achievements so they could go back to the people and say, this is the most effective way to handle Israel. Israel understands only power. If we want to show them that power and aggression and violence and terror are not effective, we must strengthen the more peaceful leadership and give it achievements when it's quiet and when it's calm and when it's cooperative. And I see the current government stepping on that direction, and it's very, very good, in my opinion.
Right, thank you. Maybe starting with, small steps, the things that they can live with, as opposed to the things that they say they can't live without. Small steps, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Shaqued, some see the Ben and Jerry's ending the sales of their ice cream in the occupied Palestinian territory as the crudest anti-Semitism masquerading. They are saying why Ben and Jerry's boycotts have not been considered or implemented anywhere else in the world. Yet, after the May conflict with Hamas, there were many canceled investments and business dealings with Israel. And every single one cited Israel's treatment of the Palestinians as the reason for the business decision.
Mm-hmm.
Ben and Jerry's is just the beginning of what's to come. Are Israelis ready to take an honest look and face the future?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, as I saw it, the move that Ben & Jerry's did was not well explained to the Israeli audience. So I don't know what message will remain with the Israelis. I guess that finally something will change, but I must tell you this. There needs to be a differentiation between what Ben and Jerry's did and what other economic bodies did, boycotting Israeli entirely. What Ben and Jerry's did was announcing that they are going to sell in Israel. They're going to sell in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, in Haifa, in Beersheba, in Lod, and anywhere else inside Israel's borders. They are stopping the sales in the settlements because this is a land under dispute, and this is an ongoing occupation of too many years. So I don't see this policy as anti-Semitic at all. I think that if you sell to the Jewish citizens of Israel living in Israel, which is not a political, there is no doubt in our political right to live here in our sovereign state, Jewish and democratic. So you can call them anti-Semites. But if you choose to not cooperate with a very problematic policy of controlling the territories with military forces, this is a political decision that must be seen as such and not hiding under the umbrella of all the world is anti-Semitic, so we don't have to confront this criticism. And I wish that more companies do just the same as Ben & Jerry's does and draw the line between legitimate Israel and the non-legitimate occupation over the West Bank. And this will send the right message that the issue is not anti-Semitism, the issue is objecting the occupation. Regarding the question of other places in the world, this is a question that needs to be directed to Ben & Jerry's, but I don't think that the fact that other injustice exists is an excuse for us to continue ours.
Absolutely. And it's very dangerous when we consider criticism of the Israeli government and policies as anti-Semitism. You know, that becomes really dangerous, and we have to be very careful with that. So we have new government on both sides, new hope for both the US and Israel. Prime Minister Bennett just visited Washington with President Biden, and that was wonderful. We all looked forward to that. President Biden conveyed his ironclad support for Israel's security and the right to self-defense. He also underscored the importance of steps to improve the lives of Palestinians and support greater economic opportunities for them, which was amazing. Biden also reaffirmed that a negotiated two-state solution is the only viable path to achieving a lasting resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But Prime Minister Bennett is a nationalist who opposes Palestinian statehood. Do you think Biden can keep the two-state solution alive by pressuring Bennett?
That might happen, but I do also believe that Israelis can and should be in charge of keeping this solution alive. This is our main mission in Peace Now. Surveys show that there is a majority within the Israeli, by the way, the Palestinian public as well. But the Israeli voters, including some of Bennett's supporters and Likud supporters, and of course the left-wing supporters, are mainly for the two-state solution. When Bennett says he's against a Palestinian state, he doesn't offer any alternative. He doesn't tell us, the Israeli people or the world, what's in his mind, what's the vision for this area in the future. Will there be an eternal occupation? What it will be named? Eternal occupation, its definition is that it must be temporary. As a prime minister, he must promote some steps to some constant solution. And at the moment, he's not suggesting any solution. And I think that what the world needs to do is, I'm very happy that Biden supported two-state solution, but also if he wishes for prosperity, both for Israelis and for the Palestinians, what the world and US can do is demand answers. What is going to happen? A two-state solution is something that we can imagine, and that's why most Israelis support it. We weren't offered any other solution that we can imagine or plan or move forward to. I don't know any such a solution, and when Bennett says no to this and he doesn't have anything on the other side, I don't believe it.
Why do you think that he has no other options for us right now?
What I see, what the two-state solution means that Israel generally backs from the territories with some land swaps and redrawing the border in a way that some settlements are annexed to Israel under mutual agreement, and some land is given in return to the Palestinians in order to have their sovereign state on the same size of territory as the one that is now occupied in West Bank and Gaza. If we plan something else for this territory, what will it be? If we annex the entire territory and don't give full rights, full citizenship to Palestinians, this will be a formal apartheid-like state. It might have another name, but it will not be a democracy anymore if we go back to the question from before. And this is something that most Israelis that were educated to believe in democracy will not accept. And the other option is to annex and give full citizenship to all the Palestinians, and having a maybe binational state, maybe some other sort of governance that includes everybody. For some people, this means the end of the Zionist dream. Others just don't believe that it can exist security-wise. So I don't see at the moment lots of support to this solution, and but I know that it is becoming more and more popular among Palestinians. Witnessing the situation of the Palestinian minority of Israeli citizens, and I don't think that Bennett supports each of these solutions, but I am afraid that his way is dragging us towards the apartheid-like one. And I think that if we will be pushed against the wall and forced to say what he is planning for us, we will find out that the price we're going to pay will be on the democratic character of Israel, and there we can have the discussion whether we are willing to pay this price or not. And the answer for me, of course, is not.
Right. There are several women's organizations who continue to work together, trying to alleviate social and economic, political problems suffered by both sides. But very few women have managed to officially involve themselves in the peace negotiations and in the process. The negotiating team from the Palestinian territories included several women at the Madrid Peace Conference and following talks in Washington in 1991. Their participation in the process has since then decreased, and the delegation no longer has any women at the highest levels. How can we promote the full involvement of women in the peace process?
First, I must tell you that, as I said, the Israeli side suffers from similar situation. I see on the Palestinian Authority a more and more presence of women in political roles. For example, in municipal councils, there are quotas for women representatives in the lists that's run in the municipal elections, something that, by the way, in Israel we don't have yet. So I see women politicians becoming more and more present, and hopefully they'll develop to a stage that they naturally get to those more senior positions. The other thing is, as I said, is the role of the media, the role of civil organizations. We can bring women forward and make women's voice heard, and also bring other issues to the table, not only the security, where the military echelon is represented. We can talk about transportation, we can talk about economy, education, all areas in which women are sometimes, you can find more experts, more women that are involved. And I can tell you that now in Israel, we have, for example, a Minister of Environment and a Minister of Transportation. Both are very strong women leaders, and they've already met with their peers in the Palestinian Authority. And I'm sure that once the negotiation renews, they will find a way to the decision-making process.
Wonderful, because you know, it's really important for women to participate.
It's very important for the society to have women participating, because I think women bring issues and perspective that sometimes is not there otherwise, and must be there in order for the agreement to be full and to be
exactly smart. And also the piece that military you know, men and politicians, male politicians, is not necessarily the piece that women are agreeing to 100%. So we need women at the table. Diversity, inclusion only has, you know, positive effects and results.
Of course. And also peace is not only between leaders, peace must be between peoples. And as such, it must contain local community leaders, education process in the system of education to prepare the younger generation for another reality, a different reality of learning to live with the other side and not hating the other side. You have to have a full division of, I'm using a militant expression, of support for such a change that must contain all parts of society and not just a narrow,
exactly,
high-ranked leaders.
Representing all of society, absolutely need to be involved in the decision-making. Today, more Arabs than Jews live between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. From a demographic perspective, if Israel does not part with the Palestinians, then there's real danger to realizing the Zionist dream of a Jewish and democratic Israel. There doesn't seem to be another solution but two countries for two people, which of course has to be negotiated. Thank you, Shaqued, for our discussion today. I look forward to seeing Peace Now and other organizations around the world continue to work for peace through a greater effort towards rights and freedoms, including the much needed advancement of women's rights. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully we don't only beat up the demographics, but also change the lives of the individuals that are in the numbers.
Wonderful, absolutely. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Happy and sweet New Year, and may we have fabulous news for this new year for all of us.
Hopefully, amen. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.